Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We'll pause here to give everyone a chance to enter the webinar, and we'll start at 2 p.m. Eastern. Thanks. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation, Funding for Stormwater Operations and Maintenance. My name is Olivia Newport, and I'm on the webinar technical support team at ERG, which is a contractor supporting this effort. Before we get started, let's review a few housekeeping items. Next slide, please. Audio is available for this presentation through your computer's mic and speakers or by telephone. Your call-in number can be found by clicking the upward arrow on the mute/unmute button in the Zoom control panel across the bottom of your screen. After you click the upward arrow, choose switch to phone audio and then follow the instructions provided. All attendees have been muted to minimize background noise. This webinar will be recorded. If you have a question during the presentation, please submit it via the Q&A box. If we have time at the end of the presentation, you can raise your hand and we will unmute you to ask the question aloud. We will hold all questions until the end of the presentation. If you're experiencing technical difficulties, please contact us via the Q&A box and we will try to troubleshoot the issue. And that's everything for housekeeping. So now we'll turn it over to Bev Vasquez with EPA's Water Finance Center. Bev?
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining the webinar. Hopefully you have participated in one of our webinars before. This is being presented by the Water Infrastructure and Resiliency Finance Center at EPA, or Water Finance Center for short. Before we get started, I want to give you a quick background on the Water Finance Center. Our responsibilities include advising, convening, and facilitating peer-to-peer learning opportunities, such as our webinar today, and providing access to information to share community models of financial and partnership success. We are an information and assistance center that helps communities make informed decisions for drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater infrastructure to really help protect human health and the environment. There's a lot that we do in the research advisory networking space to help communities get access to the much needed funding that exists for water infrastructure, to think about different and creative ways to apply it. This webinar is the third in a series of different webinars that we're doing to focus on the stormwater funding and financing. Today, we're going to focus on funding for stormwater operation and maintenance, or O&M. Most of the discussion around stormwater funding and financing focuses around capital expenditures and often does not include approaches for long-term operation and maintenance. Many of the federal funding programs, like the SRAF, do not cover operation and maintenance. This can pose a real challenge for communities. This webinar highlights some innovative and creative approaches communities around the country are using to pay for O&M for their stormwater infrastructure. So with that, let's jump right into the presentations and hear about these different approaches. I'll introduce all the different speakers and look forward to hearing the questions and discussions at the end. So first up today, we have Matt Ray with Opti RTC. Matt has over 17 years of experience in water resources, project management, and delivery, and is the strategic partnership manager for Opti and the full-time operations lead for Brightstorm, the development venture between Opti and the Nature Conservancy. Prior to joining Opti, Matt successfully managed a multi-million-dollar annual environmental compliance program while working as an environmental consultant. Matt helped to integrate one of the largest asset owners in the nation with innovative thought leaders at the EPA and the Nature Conservancy to launch Brightstorm, where a first-of-its-kind P3 approach was developed and subsequently delivered. Throughout his tenure at Opti, Matt has fostered additional relationships with large retailers, REITs, and landholders to bolster the supply side for Brightstorm, while working with regulators and potential clients on the technical engineering aspects of innovative water projects. Matt, take it away.
Thanks, Bev. Thanks for having me today, and hopefully I can present an innovative approach to this operations and maintenance kind of funding question that plagues our industry from when projects are built and kind of forgotten about for an extended period, after a few years, whether they work or not is a question. And using this kind of technology approach and this collaboration approach we've come up with kind of an innovative way to think about how to maintain and operate these things for an extended period of time. So next slide. So really, this is just kind of an executive summary of that, where anyone that's on this call kind of knows about stormwater management and stormwater pollution. But what we're really talking about today is this joint venture between the Nature Conservancy and Opti to use intelligence and to use intelligent stormwater management and kind of all of the new tools available to us today from like the Internet of Things and other types of connected resources to bring kind of a scalable solution to operations and maintenance, and some innovative financing mechanisms as well. So next slide. So historically, the main approach to all kinds of stormwater projects and problems was to build new BMPs. And these projects, they take years, they take time to develop, design, permit, build, they're expensive, and then they're quickly obsolete for many of the problems that you'll hear about today as well, which are lack of funding and financing for the long-term operations and maintenance of those BMPs. So what Brightstorm looks to answer the question of is, how do we shift the paradigm to taking the millions of obsolete projects that exist in our built environment today, and how do we make those intelligent and create a solution from these existing assets that are already on the ground over this last 30 to 50 year period. Next slide. And obviously, we know that this is a massive infrastructure problem in the United States. It's estimated that there's about 150 billion needed to upgrade stormwater infrastructure. And our cost of flooding and other water quality goals keeps going up every single year. 75 billion is the newest estimate of what stormwater flooding is costing the United States annually. Next slide. And so this joint venture and initiative that I've helped to form with the Nature Conservancy, is bringing the conservation power and lead of TNC with the technology innovation that Opti has developed to create a venture called Brightstorm, which we've just kind of launched within the last 6 months. And bringing a whole bunch of financing and project development and delivery expertise to leverage both the technology and the conservation outcomes to kind of show the benefit that I'll be talking about in my slides up front, or that are farther along. Next slide. So a little bit about the actual solution that we're talking about here today, which is Opti's software technology. Opti, as a software provider, created kind of a patented algorithm around using predictive analytics and field from weather forecasting, ingesting from NOAA and other sources, coupled with data with sensors placed in facilities throughout a watershed, and a control panel that uses telemetry to connect to the cloud, where by knowing what is happening within a facility at every given moment and what is going to happen with weather forecasting, and then some in the cloud hydraulic modeling and algorithms running, what is the best case scenario for how that facility should respond to upcoming rain events. And there's all kinds of applications for that type of technology, pretty much any type of impoundment for stormwater. And then by using active control of an actuated valve or a slide gate or a pump, you can change the hydraulic dynamics of that facility such that you can increase retention for water quality, or you can trickle flow out for flow duration control or hydromodification. You can hold water indefinitely for rainwater reuse. So there's a whole bunch of different positive outcomes from being able to actively control those assets using predictive analytics. Next slide. And so where the innovation, where this idea for Brightstorm came about was that there's a lot of these facilities that exist in the world. There are millions of stormwater ponds and impoundments in this country. And then there's a lot of regulatory demand to do water quality projects or reuse projects or any type of project that requires a new BMP, or it's driven by a TMDL or a regulatory driver. So where Brightstorm comes in is as this development entity, we can integrate the supply, because the majority of that supply is on private land. Up to 85 to 95%, depending on your geography, of all of these stormwater ponds are owned privately. And so how do we get results and projects from that private sector side to the regulatory side that needs that benefit under a permit program? And that's where Brightstorm was developed, was to provide that single source of financing, of design, of build, of maintenance and operation. And then I'll talk a little bit about how we actually do that. Next slide. And then kind of how this translates into the greater market, which is we have offtake agents where state agencies, DOTs, municipalities, utilities all have these obligations where they can take the resultant benefit from a private side, from a private pond retrofit, for instance, and meet those compliance obligations. And then there's also corporations that have internal ESG goals and other types of development that can offset kind of obligations by leveraging this kind of model of private to public or private to third party development. Next slide. And so I think it's the easiest way to understand all of this is to just really talk about the case study where we really piloted and pioneered this kind of approach. So years ago, with under the guidance of EPA Region 3, we brought a group of stakeholders together from Walmart. Walmart is one of the largest asset owners in the United States from the pond perspective. We brought the Maryland Department of Transportation, other VDOT and others, and TNC and Opti, and we all kind of sat around the table and figured out this P3 model that eventually became Brightstorm, which is if we take an existing Walmart pond that sits in the Chesapeake Bay and in Maryland, for instance, for this example, and we put Opti's technology on it, under the permitting regime and the regulatory requirements under the Chesapeake Bay program, that retrofit generates additional water quality enhancements on that facility. And those water quality enhancements then can be transferred to a third party, because obviously we're holding water for an extended period of time. You get more settling, you get more nutrient removal. And so then those are credits under the Maryland Department of Environment Crediting Program, where now we can have, by creating them on private property, the Maryland Department of Transportation can then purchase those credits from Brightstorm as the developing manager for a significant fraction of the cost it would for them to build a new pond to meet those kind of same credit requirements. Next slide. And this is kind of there's a lot of information in this slide about how this works and where the kind of the innovation is around the financing and the operations and maintenance of these things, right? So Brightstorm sits in the middle. Obviously, Walmart has, we have an agreement with them to use these assets for the public benefit. We provide those water qualities to MDOT after we install an Opti solution on that project. So in this example, we use debt financing from Prudential, but now we have internal financing that we don't need a third party. So that from TNC, Brightstorm has the capability of financing any of these projects for any kind of given period of time, depending on whoever the offtake client may be, or whatever the payment schedule or whatever the financing schedule that they may require based on their budgeting. And the interesting thing around that financing piece is that typically when you build a project, you may have a few years of maintenance around it, and then it kind of falls into, I don't know, an O&M agreement with the county or something, and somebody may look at it every few years. But with Opti's solution and the way that this whole P3 is set up, the credits that MDOT bought were for a 20-year operation and maintenance period. So all of that operations and maintenance requirement was capitalized in the upfront credit pricing. So Opti then operates these facilities with operational visibility into how the facility works every minute. It's real-time data. So you can get maintenance alerts based on what's actually happening in the field. And then we offset the capital money up front into a maintenance company or a maintenance escrow, so that that pond is maintained for the entirety of that 20-year period. And then, that's kind of the aha moment here, which is that it's all paid for upfront in a capital cost share that we then manage via escrow to maintain these ponds. And Walmart continues to maintain their pond with typical compliance for mowing and things like that. So next slide. And then finally, I know I'm out of time here. So, but we have a whole bunch of goals from this program and from this development entity. And then really around the metrics is about reducing these pollutants 20 to 60%. One of the other there's a lot of supplemental benefits once you start taking control of these assets, which is you can actually build flood capacity by being able to draw down permanent pools and ponds prior to big rain events. So you can actually build capacity in a region without building anything. And then reducing erosion to streams and peak flows and a lot of these hydromodification regulations that are coming down along the West Coast. You get a lot of stream energy reductions. So with that, I will end and thank you all.
Thanks, Matt. So next up, we have Nadia Boat with the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District. Nadia is a senior project manager with the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District. Nadia works across municipal, private, and public sectors to effectively engage stakeholders in decision-making around regional resilience. Nadia led the development of a regional resilience plan that lays out a framework for how the Milwaukee metropolitan area can address complex threats for a stronger, more resilient region. Implementation of this plan will make the district system more resilient to unanticipated flood, rainfall, and infrastructure events. The plan also addresses the needs of 20 municipalities in a comprehensive way that incorporates a triple bottom line of sustainability in order to create and implement a strategic and cost-effective plan that will benefit the Great Lakes community. Nadia specializes in project development that leverages investments in water resources to bring about additional triple bottom line benefits for communities with a focus on climate change and socially vulnerable populations. Nadia holds a bachelor's degree in history and sociology and a master's degree in geography with an urban environmental, urban waters, and policy focus, both from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Nadia, if you'd like to go ahead.
Great. So thanks for the introduction. Really today, I really want to talk about how our investments in green infrastructure are becoming the base for resilience around southeastern Wisconsin. Next slide. So just an overview, the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District is in southeastern Wisconsin along the shores of Lake Michigan. Our mission is to protect public health and the environment through world-class, cost-effective water resource management, leadership, and partnership. And we envision a healthier, cleaner, more resilient region. And a big part of that is how we can leverage and support our gray infrastructure functionality with green infrastructure flexibility on the surface. And so you'll see that today I'm going to talk about two of our innovative funding strategies that we use to help support the scale up of green infrastructure in the region because we internally just don't have the capacity to do that. Next. So the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District serves about 1.1 million customers in southeastern Wisconsin, over 28 municipalities with about 411 square miles. We have a variety of different communities, different populations, and different socioeconomic demographics across our region. And so our strategies and our funding are diverse and really need to be flexible to figure out what approaches work best for which community that we're serving. Next. So the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District has three core areas of focus. Our wastewater reclamation, where we manage 300 million gallons on a dry weather day. Flood management in southeastern Wisconsin in Milwaukee County, where we reduce the risk of flooding to our more urban communities through river revitalization strategies like removing concrete line channels, opening up bridges and culverts to reduce that flood risk coming into communities. And then the third thing that we really focus on is green infrastructure and really being able to manage that water where it falls before it enters into our gray system. Next. So the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District has identified a slew of green infrastructure goals through the course of multiple iterations of planning efforts. And what you see here really are top 3 goals that we have. So the first goal is capturing the first ½ inch of rainfall on our impervious surfaces in our service area. That's approximately 740 million gallons with a ½ inch of rainfall. That's a lot of water that we're trying to manage with green infrastructure. And really, we're trying to say both for water quantity and water quality, if we can capture that first ½ inch, we're going to vastly improve water quality, but we're also going to slow the flows in the system to try to reduce a combined sewer overflow, which is our second component. So we really want to use green infrastructure strategically to cost effectively reduce combined sewer overflows. And then we have a permit target of 50 million gallons by 2024. So really trying to meet that. Touching on the resilience component that was mentioned in my bio, as most people on the phone probably know, green infrastructure offers a variety of additional co-benefits. And our other areas of focus that we're not talking about today really are looking at climate change, looking at serving our more socially vulnerable communities, what that looks like. And so we know that strategic implementation of green infrastructure doesn't just impact water, but you do have climate change mitigation and carbon sequestration. You can have a reduced urban heat island effect. By replacing gray with green, you're changing communities and you're really creating these new green spaces. And so it certainly is about the green infrastructure and the water component, but we also realize that we have the ability and opportunity really to leverage these investments in critical infrastructure to do more for the communities that we're serving. So we can really attend to multiple goals. Next. So we have challenges, and those challenges are providing opportunities. And our biggest challenge is based on the goals that I identified. We really lack an internal capacity to scale up to our work to reach those goals. We would have to, double, triple our staff that we have to really reach those goals. And so what we've decided to do is we've decided to create 2 innovative funding strategies that really look at how we can leverage external support, external need through stormwater management plans, and external capacity to scale up green infrastructure. So I'm going to talk through both of those today. And next. And the first program is our Fresh Coast Protection Partnership Program. And this is a P3 approach that we are currently in phase 1 of. So this is a public-private partnership. And what this approach does is allows for a new level of strategic project direction. Because what we're able to do with this type of a P3 approach is really engage the private sector to do a lot of the work, but with a ton more flexibility than what we have under our utility. So they offer not only different insights, but again, that flexibility, and you'll see some of that in being able to offer like maintenance services. But they also have an incentive to perform. So it is not just trying to meet a stormwater management goal, but they have a fiscal incentive to perform. And so that really helps the P3 approach because we want gallons and they want money, which works well for all of us. So some of the risk also is removed from MMSD because the way that we've structured our P3 is really based on a performance-based contract structure. So they need to have gallons in the ground to get paid. So to date, we haven't done an invoice yet. We just finished our first construction project, but they've been working because they get paid when they have gallons. So really that risk goes on to the private portion of this P3 because they're the ones that have to find and build these systems. Next. So how are we actually structuring this P3 approach? This is the first time that we've done something like this, and it has been a lot of learning opportunities. So it took us several years to actually develop a request for proposals and months of negotiations with the selected firm to determine the best project management and financial approach. So we really went out and we said, okay, tell us how you would structure this approach. And we got a lot of solid responses, and the consultant that we did end up partnering with actually added a lot more than we had anticipated. So their current contract actually includes, they have to identify the sites, they have to do all of the planning, all of the design, all of the bidding, all of the construction, all of the warrantying, and the administrative work. And when we had originally done the RFP, we really thought about splitting kind of that design and construction section, but having a private entity really be able to be creative and say, no, it makes a lot more sense if one person can do it all. It was really helpful. So based on this performance-based contract fee, we negotiated at $2.36.50 per gallon that we will pay for the work that's being done. And that 236.5 includes all of those contract components that I just listed. So using a private partner in part of the P3 approach also allows us to have more flexibility to add incentives for the projects. And one of those incentives that they're able to add if a private landowner is uncomfortable or is not sure if they can maintain it is our private partner can say, hey, we'll maintain this system for 2, 3, 4, 5 years because they have flexibility in what their cost margin is going to be and what their profit margin is going to be. Next. So for our P3, we're doing it as a phased approach. So right now we're in the middle of phase 1. Our goal was 8.45 million gallons. It's a $20 million contract, and we have a year of vegetative establishment. We're working on phase 2 now in the RFP for that. We are doubling our goal to between 15 and 17 million gallons for 50 million over a contract of 2023 to 2027. This year, one thing we're realizing is that we want a 5-year vegetation establishment. And one of the reasons for increasing that vegetation establishment barrier is because within a capital investment in the program, we really can reduce our O&M on the backside. Next. So the goals of the P3 are to make green infrastructure an affordable alternative to gray infrastructure through grouping projects and standardizing designs. We want to reduce the overflow volume and flooding issues through targeted implementation to achieve our organizational goals more effectively. And that really couples and complements the next program I'm going to talk about. And then we want to build local capacity and private property participation in green infrastructure so that the onus isn't just on municipalities. Next. So our takeaways from this P3 are there definitely were challenges. So one of the challenges was creating the process for roles and responsibilities, sharing information, decision making. We really had to trust the private partner to make the right decisions for the program and for the long-term goal. And it's a consistent challenge to make sure that the design standards are met. So making sure we're not allowed to do detention basins. And so you can't do a detention basin and put plants in it perhaps and then call it a rain garden detention basin. Our wins are we have a really solid project framework for projects moving forward, especially for phase 2. Next. The second innovative funding strategies that we're implementing is really with incentive funding. So we have 3 different programs that focus on municipalities as our green solutions, our public and private not-for-profit organizations, and this is more of like a grant program through our Green Infrastructure Partnership Program, and then our Green Schools programs, and that's really focused on schools. And what these incentive funding programs do is they target those different stakeholders through different strategies and are saying, we know that you need to achieve these things and we want these things, so how can we help support you? And so we have tailored all of these programs to really help meet the needs of each of these different stakeholders over the times that the programs have been developed. Next. So the goals of our incentive funding programs are the municipal funding program and the grant funding program to private, public, and non-partner programs. It's a match program. So really we want them to have skin in the game. This is not just free money. They want to meet an objective and so do we, but creating a strategy where they actually have to participate fiscally has really been helpful for us. The municipal funding supports meeting the stormwater management goals and helping municipalities. So one of the things in the resilience plan that was mentioned is fiscal constraints. Municipalities have lots of things they need to spend money on. So by helping to support that through an incentive funding program, we're helping to take the onus off of the other critical services that municipalities are continuing to make tough decisions about. And then it also allows for flexibility for design and construction to fit various landowner needs. And so an example that you see here is a school program that we have. So you can't do traditional green infrastructure necessarily in a school. By using the same approximate amount of investment, you can really create new green spaces, outdoor classroom areas, removing concrete, replacing with green, but also improving the schools at the same time. Next. So some of our takeaways, the challenges for some of these programs are municipalities and partners are all at different places in their ability to identify and design GI. For maintenance, there's consistently a lack of budget, a lack of capacity or skills to do the work. And we're really looking for more regulatory support for requirements of inspections and follow-up to make sure that the investments in green infrastructure are being maintained from a regulatory component. Our wins are we've developed a ton of great relationships. We're helping partners and ourselves meet our goals. We're getting a lot of gallons in the ground. And really, MMSD is trying to take the brunt of the learning curve for these programs to try to make it easier for partners. So we've developed O&M manuals. We've developed sizing and plant selection tools. We're developing research for performance of green infrastructure. And we're looking at real-time monitoring to help be able to tailor similar to the previous presenter, how we can really target the need for O&M versus just a shotgun approach. Next. And that is it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nadia. And next up, we have Jill Hingas with PowerCorp's PHL. Julia is the executive director and co-founder of PowerCorp's PHL. Julia leads the development of PCPHL's industry training curriculum and partnerships. She continues to refine the PCPHL model, expand its impact, and work as a bridge builder between young people and economic opportunities. Prior to PCPHL, Julia previously served as the Deputy Service Officer for Mayor Michael Nutter's Office of Civic Engagement and Volunteer Service, and in the Mayor's Office of Education, and as a Philadelphia AmeriCorps Vista. She has over a decade of experience as an educator, coach, community organizer, and program leader, making impact across sectors and projects, and understanding how young people learn and what it takes to make impact. She holds an MA in secondary education and a BA in political science from Temple University. In addition to Julia, we have Paul Harris, who is the superintendent of mechanical maintenance with Buffalo Sewer Authority. Mr. Harris brings to the authority over 15 years of mechanical engineering and project management experience from the private sector. Prior to joining the authority, Mr. Harris was a senior mechanical equipment engineer with Praxair Inc. During his tenure at Praxair, Paul was a rotating equipment specialist and oversaw worldwide air separation plant development pertaining to major equipment integration, design review, produce line development, mechanical and aerodynamic performance testing, commissioning and startup of inline radial isothermal compressors up to 50,000 horsepower, and double-ended surface condensing steam engine turbines up to 80,000 horsepower. Paul also oversaw design and integration of cryogenic systems and plant cooling systems, and provided senior technical support and expertise on static and rotating equipment to all global engineering regions. Julia, take it away.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining. So you can go to the next slide. In 2013, actually we'll start in 2011, the city of Philadelphia implemented something called Green City Clean Waters, our 25-year plan to mitigate stormwater pollution through green infrastructure. Within 2 years, obviously they learned what everyone else in this call learns is like, you can put them all in and then what do you do with them? Because you need to maintain them. In 2013, so 2 years later, so we came right when they're starting to construct the first set of GI around the city. I founded PowerCorp PHL as a city initiative with multiple nonprofit partners. Our goals were to, one, support the city's ambitious climate resiliency goals, which include Green City Clean Waters, as well as some goals around air pollution and heat island effect. At the time, Philadelphia was still coming out of the Great Recession of 2010. It was still suffering from that. So we had high levels of youth unemployment, and correlated to that, high levels of violence that were in the same demographic. And so we were tasked with creating a solution to meet all those social impact goals and leverage a diverse set of funding to do it. So Philadelphia is the poorest big city in the nation. And so there's definitely municipal investment, but we need to leverage other money to make it all happen. So what you're seeing now is, fast forward to 2021, we now run what we call industry academies in several industries in clean energy and green infrastructure. So green infrastructure maintenance, in urban forestry, in solar electrical, and then we also do a couple other things that are in the works. You can go to the next slide. Yep. And so one of those includes working with engineering firms to co-design, what inspections of those green infrastructure sites are. So it's surface maintenance, subsurface maintenance, but also once they go in, you need those inspectors. When the more construction happens, you need those inspectors. And so we've been working with industry to identify, I think the last speaker talked about, there's a lack of skills and capacity for folks who know how to do this work. We've been working directly with the industry and with our utility to understand where's the gap in the talent, where's the holdup in the construction and maintenance process, and then how do we train people who are on or underemployed in those skills to fill those positions that are vacant. Can go to the next slide. So this is, at a glimpse, what we do is we, as the nonprofit provider, take charge of all the recruitment. So we're specifically aiming for young people who are on and underemployed from 18 to 30 years old. For us, that's the overlapping segment of folks who have a disproportionate rate of unemployment and disproportionate rate of involvement in the court system and involvement with sort of public benefits that, they should be starting their careers instead of sort of being stagnant. We then run something we call foundations, which is their baseline sort of work readiness. They're doing it on public green space projects. So the city and residents of the city are getting an immediate benefit, and the young people are getting paid training to take care of lots of maintenance projects in our parks and also in our green infrastructure. Through that, they're exploring their career options, and then they choose into much more technical and specific industries like what I rattled off, and you'll see again. The keys for us here are that we're recruiting talent that right now is not, contributing as much as it could be to the economy and not tapping into their potential as much as they could be. We're designing everything with industry and employers from the get-go. So we don't want to train someone on something and then have the employer say, oh, that's not how we do it. So we always bring in, if we do any training, from the jump, we have to have industry and employers from the beginning. Oftentimes those employers are the utilities themselves. At this point, our water department has an apprenticeship program. They source 70% of their talent for their apprentices from PowerCore PHL. So we've been building that, over time since 2013. All of the training is paid, and I'll talk about how we leverage that in a moment. But they're paid through sources that the utility itself could not otherwise access if it weren't for this workforce development component. So we're putting money back into the pockets of young people in the city, and then they are paying taxes on that, so that adds into the tax base for the municipality. And then our goals are, that it results for the individual in a quality job at the end of that, but then also this maintenance is happening in real time that's needed both on green infrastructure and then at large with climate resiliency projects. And, our ethos is we can help young people and individuals sort of meet their individual needs and success by advancing these community benefit projects. You'll see sort of a little bit of the general demographics over the past 8 years of who tends to come to PowerCore. It's not a quota, it's more just that's how we ended up with our recruiting. You can go to the next slide. So to dive a little deeper, these are the industry academies that we currently run. I talked about green infrastructure, which is, I think everyone's familiar on this call. Urban forestry, which has quite a bit of overlap. When you think of Philadelphia has 11,000 acres of parked land that then has GSI laid on top of that in some cases. And then when you have storms like Ida come through, all of a sudden you have, you've just had some of those sites destroyed or have, are malfunctioning because of that. Our crews are able to come through pretty flexibly and take care of what's needed on that site. We run a solar track, masonry, and then some things more community-based careers in youth work and education. The way that we pay people for these trainings is by leveraging public workforce investment dollars, by leveraging money for things like climate cores, which that's like the new hot word right now in federal government. But the reality is things that would be considered climate cores have already existed, like PowerCore, like many other conservation cores have already existed for some time now. We access money either through AmeriCorps or for other conservation pots of money. And we sort of leverage those and braid them all together in order to meet these public climate goals, as well as to employ and train young people. And then we're also, as a nonprofit, are able to leverage sort of social impact grants and things like that, that a typical municipality or utility wouldn't necessarily be a compelling case for. But when you marry us all together, it is quite compelling to say like, okay, you're getting this community benefit immediately, you're getting this economic benefit for residents of the same city that the climate projects are in, and we can marry together municipal dollars with private dollars with federal dollars and sort of bring it all home and make amplify the impact of each of those investments together. Next slide, please. So a little bit of our stats, over 90% of our graduates of our training move right into employment. Pre-pandemic, those starting wages were anywhere from $12 to $17 an hour. To give you some benchmarking, Pennsylvania and Philadelphia are quite far behind in what minimum wage in Pennsylvania is still $7.25 an hour. Pre-pandemic, starting entry level at a city civil servant's job was about $12.10 an hour. So we are coming in much above that. Obviously, wages have increased quite a bit post-pandemic, and so we haven't updated that data, but we're seeing those increases correspond with the employment that folks are going into. A little bit about recidivism. So we do actively target folks who have been court involved. So those are our recidivism stats. To compare that to our citywide recidivism rate is about 45 to 50%. Ours for 1 year out is about 8%. So quite reduced from what you're seeing in the general population at large. And then a big thing is that 40% of our budget is just going to direct benefits to constituents of the city. So they're getting money in their pockets, they're getting certifications paid for, they're accessing educational credits and training at no cost to them, while the city itself is getting this maintenance work done. You can go to the next slide. Yep, and so Paul will talk a lot about Buffalo, and at the end we'll bring it all home. But about a year ago, Paul and I met and we sort of traded notes on what we've been working on, what we're trying to do next, and we're really excited to be partnering with Paul up in Buffalo.
Thanks, Julia. So Julie and I, as she mentioned, met, and it's been wonderful, great working together with Power Corps to try to implement our local maintenance program for green infrastructure. So before I get into that, I'm just going to give kind of a quick overview about the Buffalo Sewer Authority, and I'll jump into the green infrastructure portion. Next slide, please. So Buffalo Sewer is the second largest water resource recovery facility in New York State. We have the ability to treat up to a maximum about 560 MGD with an average design of about 180 MGD using secondary treatment. And our facility is basically on an island in between the US and Canada. Next slide, please. We were first built and established in 1935. We service not only the city of Buffalo, but some about 11 surrounding municipalities. We serve roughly over 550,000 people, have over a $50 million operating budget, and on average about 20 million in capital projects. But we are working on some significant infrastructure upgrade programs right now, which are pretty extensive. Next slide, please. So the main focus of our long-term control plan, or we're working on a long-term control plan. And one of the components of controlling the stormwater runoff is through green infrastructure. And what we're trying to do is manage about 1,300 acres of impervious surface area through green infrastructure. In doing that, I was asked to create a green infrastructure maintenance department to maintain these sites and these assets. Currently, there's about 66 acres that have been implemented. We're planning to add an additional 200 acres that need active maintenance. Right now, we've figured that we need, in order to maintain those 66 acres, about 16 people. Right now, we have only about 4 or 5 people in our green infrastructure maintenance department. And we're foreseeing that we would need about 50 to 70 people over the next 3 to 5 years as we implement the next groupings of green infrastructure. That inherently is what led to obviously the need to create a pipeline of support for a maintenance department, and trying to do so in a way to get skilled labor and to get folks that are trained and understanding green infrastructure. But we also wanted to focus on equity. That's a real big part of our focus in what we call a rain check program, where we've looked at means of implementing green infrastructure throughout the city, but also doing that through the lens of equity. Next slide, please. So what I first did was to work on developing an RFP. To at the end of the day, we wanted to make sure that we could bring folks on to help us, maintain these green infrastructure sites, but we wanted to develop a third party here locally that could take the lead in doing this work and developing folks that can do this type of work, but leave the training and the recruiting and all that work and bringing folks on to the organization, and then allow us to be able to get the benefit of hiring folks to do the work. The focus on equity, we've broken up the city into different, what we call CSO basin areas, priority basin areas. We wanted to focus on two of those particular basin areas, basin 26 and 53. We looked at, again, through the lens of equity, we wanted to look at socioeconomic factors. We wanted to look at environmental factors to make sure that's a part of the solution in bringing folks in to meet these green infrastructure maintenance needs. We also wanted to make sure in doing so that full wraparound services are being provided, so that folks, not only are being trained in green infrastructure, but also, meeting any kind of needs that they may have, like core knowledge needs, work readiness, social supports as well. And then we do, in knowing that we might need a maximum of, say, 50 to 70 people, we have a challenge in that the work is essentially seasonal, right? So we can't hire folks to do work the entire year. Part of that work is just seasonal. So the goal was to try to hire a certain amount of that number, maybe 20 to 30 folks. I should say the goal is the future perspective, and then ultimately to keep maybe a revolving sort of door, if you will, of 30 to 40 people that can come in, help to provide support in maintaining these sites, but also are able to get alternative placements, so that once they finish doing the work and providing support, they can find alternative work or training in another industry. Next slide. So in doing so, working with issuing the RFP, PowerCorp ended up winning the proposal. We've worked with them, and as Julia just mentioned, the program works really well in meeting our BSA rain check equity goals. They've done a great job working with the local. Was also a big part of our focus in the RFPs to make sure that we're able to develop a third-party local organization to implement a model. So they've trained that local organization called Heart of the City to develop this model. They've gone out and recruited in those critical CSO areas that I mentioned previously. We were looking, our goal was to get 5 to 6 folks to help us and to come in and be candidates for this first phase, and they've done so. They're really working well at addressing pipeline needs. We can tell that the way that the recruiting and implementing this model through a third party is really making it easier to build that model and continue to keep that going. The other benefit of this is that the program model really works well with that seasonal model I mentioned to you. We're able to bring folks in, they can work with our teams, we can go out and maintain, address, or maintain our green infrastructure sites. Once we get to a full capacity of hiring folks, which ultimately we want to hire some of these great candidates that are coming on, when we do get to capacity again, the program has the responsibility finding other opportunities for these candidates. From a funding standpoint, it's really like a win-win. Folks are getting the opportunity to get on-the-job training. That's something that they can obviously gain benefit from themselves personally, with as well as with wraparound training, but something they can also put on the resume, and then they get support in either getting hired eventually by the BSA or going to looking at some other opportunity. It also helps to offset our workload, and what that does is allow us to hire a certain number of folks full time, but then we can also have that seasonal revolving door, if you will, of folks coming in that are also providing and meeting those maintenance needs. So it's really just a win-win. We're not having to address full meeting fringe benefits and those things for the full workforce need, if you will. There's also plenty of grant funding opportunities that are available right now. We've been working with PowerCorps, and the heart of the city to address and find other and apply for grant opportunities. And we've also reached out to for congressional support as well. Next slide. And I have to apologize. This slide actually is somewhat redundant. So the only thing I just wanted to mention is that we've really been impressed with subject matter expertise from PowerCorps Philly. They've provided a lot of insight. They've been doing this for, I think, over 6, maybe 8 years. We've found that that's been really helpful for us, being that this is only our 2nd year doing this. They've been able to bring on industry best practices and help our folks to understand how to implement that as we work together with them and their teams, or the candidates. They've also provided NGICP training, which is a National Green Infrastructure Certification for folks that don't know that. And they've also helped to close a gap for us, because one of our subject matter experts ended up taking another opportunity somewhere else. So they were able to kind of fill that gap and help us. And ultimately, I mean, you can see from the smiles and, just looking at the folks in the photos, we've been really impressed with the talent they've identified locally. And we're really looking forward to bringing on some highly skilled folks as a result. And I think that's it.
Great, thank you all so much. If all presenters could please turn their cameras back on. To start the Q&A session, Paul and Julia, we have a question for you. On equity and community support, are there criteria built into the P3 program cost transfer so that poorer community sectors are protected from significant water rate and water infrastructure cost increases?
Not sure if that's actually for us, but I would say that the plans are definitely, the infrastructure is across the city, and then the way that it's being managed is citywide, knowing that we need to hit all of them sort of equally.
Yeah, the equity report that we worked on and we developed through our rain truck program was citywide. Okay, so we looked at all kinds of metrics and factors that impact folks in underserved communities and around the city of Buffalo. We worked that out with other organizations as well. So our goal was to prioritize the priority basins that were the most challenging and work through that way. So with PowerCorps, with their model and with the local organization, the heart of the city, we're working together to try to work those priority basin areas.
Okay, thank you. This question is for all our panelists. On trust, if a private partner is doing everything, including accounting, and the incentive is to log more gallons, how does accountability of design and effectiveness work?
I can start with that answer. So I think that I put a typed answer into the Q&A, but for us, it's really about developing strong communication strategies and program management up front. And so for the accountability component, it's not that the P3 and the private partner just has free reign to do whatever they want. It is a true partnership. And so ensuring design of that true partnership and being clear on roles and responsibilities and specific checkpoints and milestones, I think is really important. And so it is a true partnership where they're going back and doing the work, but it's not just, okay, well, here's the money, go ahead and do it. They're coming back to us at our monthly project meetings. We're saying, okay, what sites have you selected? Why did you select these? What are the strategic indicators, Paul? Thinking about those equity indicators, so our more socially vulnerable communities where we're having flooding issues. So the partnership is a true partnership. It's not just free reign of like, we hope that the private entity does the best that they can. So one of the biggest challenges we've been working through is in designs that I mentioned, and the private partner continues to try to design detention basins, and that's not an acceptable green infrastructure strategy for us. And so when we see a design or a detention basin, we say, nope, you need to go redesign this. This is not acceptable. And you cannot just put rain garden plants on the fringe and hope that then we just think it's a rain garden, because indeed it is lipstick on a pig, and the pig being a detention basin. So I think for us, it's a lot of communication, but it's not just free reign. It's a true partnership.
Matt, I had seen you also unmuted. Did you want to take a stab at that question as well?
No, I'm sorry. That question was directly for Nadia.
Okay. We do have a question up next for you that I believe you already answered in the chat, but we wanted the broader audience to hear. Some states don't have water quality credits yet. Are there some alternatives for towns to get a credit similar to water quality credits that some states offer?
Yeah, the question there is really around drivers, right? It's not so much that these projects in this development vehicle is to generate just to generate credits, but it's really around whatever that metric any individual municipality has from their driver, right? There's a lot of impaired watershed plans or just MS4 priorities that folks target, and these assets exist in those watersheds and sub-watersheds. And by retrofitting them from a performance-based kind of contracting, which is really what we're talking about here, which is like, you don't have to pay for it unless it solves your problem, right? And so those problems, whether it be flow duration or enhanced retention or reuse or whatever it is, we can kind of figure out from the design perspective if there's a return there or an actual project that we can make out of those private assets, or even the public assets. In that case, we can also leverage this for public entities and public assets. So yeah, this isn't just a credit market solution, but it's really a site by site kind of application.
Okay, thank you. Nadia, we have a question for you. Is there a minimum payment to the P3 if a drought occurs and the gallons per do not provide an effective return on investment?
No, because we're looking at the long-term return on investment over the lifetime of the system. And so when we do gallons in the ground, it's based on the gallons coming from the impervious that can be captured in the ground. So what is the system designed to be able to infiltrate? And so that's the gallons that we're using. The systems that we're building are meant to be forever. And so unfortunately with climate change, we know that they will be flooded. We know we'll get water in there at some point. So even if it's a drought or a drier year, no, that does not matter. It's what the system is designed for gallons for that 236.5.
Okay, thank you. And this will be our last question before we wrap up today's webinar. Julia, could you respond to the question? Do you have issues with unions that might be in the maintenance department taking away jobs?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And we actually are very proud to say that we are training talent to go into unionized jobs. And so in the very beginning, so first of all, there's more maintenance than the current capacity. So we've had decades of deferred maintenance across all of our green spaces. That was true at the point that the first, GI went into the ground in 2012. And so the conversation with the unions at the time was really, hey, how do we delineate tasks? What's the best use of the existing unionized workforce? And then how do we make sure we're training high quality candidates to enter your union and strengthen that base? So that's really how we've dealt with it. At this point, we have dozens upon dozens of alumni who are now in DC 33 in the union, and are rising up the ranks in that leadership as well. So I think it's really just having a conversation about what are we trying to do? We're trying to strengthen the union base and understand that right now the capacity isn't there. No one's going to be able to get to it in the way that's set up and existing. So it's really taking off of the plate folks that are not, the maintenance isn't going to happen if we don't add some extra capacity to it.
And I just want to add to that too, if I could, Olivia, that one of the things we've noticed is there hasn't been any issue with our unions regarding that so far. They like the idea that we have spots to fill, and we have a pipeline of folks coming in that are going to fill those spots, and so they've been open to it, and we haven't experienced any issues.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'll turn it back to EPA for closing remarks.
Thank you, Olivia. We want to thank all of our presenters for joining us today and all of you for coming in, watching, and listening to our webinar today. As a reminder, all of the presentations and the recording of today's webinar will be posted on EPA's website in a few weeks. So thank you all again and enjoy the rest of your day.